All right. Good morning, everyone. I have 11:01, so just a minute off, but we'll go ahead and get started with the fourth and, at least for the moment, final webcast in our Watershed Hacks for Uncertain Times series. Today, we are going to be talking about sustainable lawns and conservation landscapes. We are really excited to go over today's webcast. We have covered a lot of ground in the last couple of weeks. And the weather is not quite the best, at least here in my Maryland neck of the woods, for getting outside and gardening today. But hopefully this weekend, it won't be quite as cold as they're predicting. We'll be able to get outside and use a few of the tips and tricks that we get to go over today. For those of you who have not joined us to this point in our webcast series, I just want to let you know what we're trying to do here today and over the last couple of weeks. We are obviously, as you all know, stuck at home right now, and so we thought we'd put together this weekly webcast series to talk about what we can do at home and in our own backyards for watershed protection, restoration, and improving water quality and stormwater management. While we try to make all of our webcasts fun and sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback. Folks can mute their lines, please. But we are going to really focus on things that are practical, family-oriented approaches, since we're all, or a lot of us are home with our families, or if not our families, our roommates or significant others. And we really want it to be something that's interactive. So we've been turning our cameras on, which is not a thing that we have always done on our webcast series. We are having a little bit more discussion. We've set it up so we're going to do some light quizzes and polls today with you all. We're going to have a Q&A with our panelists at the end for some other topics outside of just our presentation. And we also want to hear from you all. We have the chat feature in Zoom. Please feel free throughout the presentation to put your questions in there. Also, if you have any other ideas, tips, tricks, comments on anything that we're talking about today, we would love to have that added to the discussion as well. If we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll also open up the phone lines, as they say, and take a few callers if you guys want to weigh in on anything that we've covered. The last thing I'll mention, unlike the last couple of weeks, I do have a poll, or a survey rather, at the end today. There's a link that I'll put up. If you can take a minute to fill that out, it's to sort of let us know what you thought about this webcast series. If it's the first time you're joining us, or if you've joined us for all four, do you like the way that we've been doing it? Are there things that we could either improve upon, or that you wish we would incorporate into our other webcasts? Anything like that. And if we were to do maybe another one or two webcasts in this series, what topics would you like to see us cover? So just a plug for that. I'll also let you know if we do run a couple of minutes long, we're going to aim to wrap up around noon today, but I'll confess that we've been running about 15 minutes over the last couple of weeks. So we are recording today's session. The slides and the recording will be available on our website probably by Monday. And so you can catch the last couple of minutes if you do have to jump off at 12. Sorry about that, but I just know that we have been not as prompt as promised. If you missed our other webcasts and want to check them out, if you like what you hear today and you think you'd like to see the other ones that we've done, on April 17th, we covered Victory Rain Gardens, some really cool tips and tricks if you want to put your own rain garden in, where you can find plant material while everything is shut down at the moment, what you can do to size your rain gardens, kind of easy steps to walk through it and make your life a little bit easier when you're trying to design and build that rain garden. We also on April 24th did one on tree canopy, tree planting practices. So we spent a little bit of time on the basics of planting your trees and keeping them alive, but we spent a lot of time on finding the right species for what you're looking for on your property, or maybe if you're looking a little bit beyond when things start opening back up again, what might fit for some of your other projects and environments. And then last Thursday, we had one of the most unique webcasts of our 100 plus that we have in our archives on stormwater art. So incorporating art projects into your stormwater projects at home, but we also covered some projects on school, public school sites, and a lot of really cool ideas for art projects that you can do with your families, with your kids in particular, while you're at home, that incorporate watershed and restoration type lessons. So please check those out if that sounds interesting to you. So we have quite the cast with us today. We are going to get started by doing, we're calling it homeschooling, a little bit of a test of your knowledge, a quiz. Alana Hartman is going to be leading that. Alana is the Potomac River Basin Coordinator with West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection and an outstanding board member of CSN. We're really excited to have her and her perspective with us today. Tom Schuler, our esteemed executive director here at CSN, is going to be talking about the Zen approach to lawn care. So taking care of the turf that you do choose to leave behind in your yard if you're not fully converting the entire thing to meadow and conservation landscape, which I totally get. We're going to talk about that. We have Philip Merritt, who's a landscape architect for HG Design Studio. He has a lot of experience in residential and campus landscape design and is a longtime advocate for native plants. So he's going to talk about conservation landscaping. And then Mary Gaddis, who is the acting president of the board here at CSN, is going to join us as one of our hackers to help facilitate our Q&A with our panelists, weigh in and give some advice based on her experience in the public, private, and nonprofit sector that she's had for years, many of which as a coordinator with the local government advisory committee at the Bay program. And like I said, we want contributions from all of you as well, so please feel free to chime in throughout the day. So this is the basic overview for what we're going to cover. Like I said, we'll have our introduction, which I am pretty much wrapped up with. I'll get out of the way. Turn it over to Alana for our homeschooling, Zen lawn care. Tom's also going to talk a little bit about our crop circle challenge, which I'll leave in a little bit of mystery for you all. We referenced it in the rain garden webcast back on the 17th if you were there, but we'll talk a little bit more about that before getting into conservation landscaping and then some hacks for your home landscape. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alana to get into one of our more interactive sessions today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Alana Hartman. I live in West Virginia. Hopefully we have some West Virginians on the webcast today. We have about 8 quiz questions, so we better get started, David. So if you can advance the slide, please. All right, so first one, which of the following statements is true? There are more than twice as many. Oh yeah, we're doing a poll. You can click, can you guys see the poll? Yes, okay. There are more than twice as many acres of turf cover than wetland in the Bay watershed, or there are now at least 50 acres of turf for every acre of seagrass in the Bay, or turf cover now exceeds all these different ag acreages, or turf cover has tripled in the last 4 decades. Which one do you think is true? Hopefully you guys can all click on those poll questions. Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing.
And folks can select more than one in this one, right, Alana?
Yes, yes. So take another minute to select more than one, hint, hint. All right, yeah, it's pretty even. Everybody's picking all the answers, which is absolutely right, because that was a trick question. Can you all see the results? Trick question. All the answers were correct. You could probably tell by how technical they were. Those answers all come from the clipping point, which is CSN's technical bulletin number 8. All right, so next poll question and next slide. Which of the following statements is not true? So the opposite. 215 million pounds of nitrogen fertilizer is applied to bay lawns, which could grow 2 million acres of corn. Or lawn and garden equipment is the second leading emitter of smog precursors in the summer, right behind cars and trucks. Or more than 50,000 folks work for lawn care companies in the watershed, and we spend a lot of money on our grass. Or Tom Schuler has 2 eyebrows. Looks like people think that is not true. Okay, good job. The answer was D. That's the only one that's not true. And this was used with Tom's permission, by the way. All right. Next question. I launched the poll. Okay, so hopefully your poll isn't obscuring your screen. If you look at all these different 12 factors that could happen on your lawn, you will probably find one that means that you are at high risk for nutrient export. Don't feel bad, because a lot of these are beyond your control. Like, for example, if your house is in a karst terrain, like number 12, you can't really do anything about that. But knowing is half the battle, so it's good to know if your lawn is at high risk for nutrient export. Just give you another second to read them. Well, it's about 50-50. I'm going to end it now. So again, at least the 48% of you that answered yes, at least you know that that's happening and you can take measures to reduce your nutrients. All right, next one. And by the way, that was from a 2014 expert panel report on urban nutrient management. All right, this one's about leaves. What % of your Bay neighbors said that they bag, mulch, or compost their leaves? And keep in mind that the highest number we have on here is 65, so everybody else is just letting them blow around. And we'll have some more items ahead on this webcast about leaves, so just let this be a teaser. All right, we're pretty evenly split here. I'll show you the results, but the answer was 50%, according to a 2017 survey by the Chesapeake Bay Trust, which is called the Chesapeake Bay Stewardship Survey. 50%. All right, next one. This one's about pesticides and herbicides. Advance the poll here. Okay, according to the most recent Bay survey, what % of Bay residents apply pesticides and herbicides on their property? 18 to 69. What do you think? And this is from the same 2017 stewardship survey. Wow, very good. You guys must have seen the survey before. Letter D was the answer, 52%. 37% of you got that right. Good job. All right, next one. What % of urban streams sampled nationwide had one or more pesticide compounds that exceeded chronic aquatic life toxicity criteria? This was a study by USGS in 2015, national monitoring study. And I forgot to launch the poll. There it is. 10% up to 90%. Lots of answers in the high range. Unfortunately, that's our perception, I think. We're not doing a good job with our toxicity. All right. Okay, a lot of you picked 70%. Unfortunately, the answer is 90%. There's your results. All right, 2 more. No, 3 more, sorry. 2 more, I don't know. What % of urban streams sampled? Oh, sorry, that's why there are only 2 more. Number 8, how many households own a dog and what % pick up after their pets? And I think on this one, you can pick more than one answer as well. So about 40% of households own a dog. Only half of dog owners are dog walkers. 60% of dog walkers claim to pick up after their dog some or all of the time, or they're all a bunch of liars. And the source of this one is back in 2000, the Center for Watershed Protection did a study on Chesapeake Bay watershed behavior. Wonder if it's changed since then. All right, good job. You guys picked pretty much all the questions or all the answers, and you're right, they're all correct. Okay, last one, here comes the poll. What percentage of homeowners wash their own cars and how frequently do they do it? And again, you can pick more than one. 65% of households wash their cars themselves. 60% of those can be considered chronic car washers, meaning they wash at least once a month. And 80% reported they wash their wash water drains directly to the street. Same study by Center for Watershed Protection in 2000. I'm going to end it here in a couple seconds. And good job again. You guys picked all the answers and they're all correct. So very good job. Hopefully that whet your appetite for some of the types of things that we can talk about today. Get your questions ready. And now I think we're going to do some Zen.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom to take it away on the Zen guide for lawn care. I think that's a good stage setter. Thanks, Alana. I like the ability to just kind of see some of those numbers are a little bit surprising. And, you know, I think to your point about how things are changing, unfortunately, I think some of those are not changing all that much, the ones that are a little bit older in the surveys. But that's why we're here to do something about it. So, Tom, are you ready to go?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Zen approach to lawn care. Most of us have at least some turf on our property. So here are some of the tips that I've developed over the past few years. Next slide. First of all, though this isn't a poll, but there are a lot of things superior to cutting your grass. And if we want to have inner peace, we can do cloud watching, moss identification, listening to small songbirds, taking a good old afternoon nap, which is one of my favorite activities. On the nighttime, moon gazing, enjoying a cold beverage, or on a rainy day, watching home and garden TV reruns. So anyway, the first tip is we don't have to do anything at all to usually have a pretty good, reasonably green lawn. Part of it is in our watershed in the Chesapeake Bay, power plant and vehicle emissions send about 15 pounds of nitrogen per acre from the sky to feed your yard. While those emissions aren't really great for the planet, they do provide free feed for your turf. It's about 20% of the fertilizer requirements out there. So that's the first tip. The next tip is you may be a slacker, but you're not alone. That same Chesapeake Bay Trust Stewardship Survey that Alana just referenced indicate that 64% of your neighbors rarely or never fertilize their yards, and their freedom lawns, as some people call them, are still reasonably green. And in this case, if you have very good eyes, you can see they're complete freedom lawns because everyone is flying their flag. Actually, I think this was done on the 4th of July, but you know, it's not, you know, you can have a perfectly acceptable lawn without fertilization and excessive lawn care, irrigation, or pesticide application. So that's the second tip. The third tip is to invest a little bit in technology, and that investment is a composting mower. Most mowers now are of this design, but not only having that composting mower, but setting the blade up to its highest level of 2 or 3 inches According to surveys, almost 6 out of 10 of us practice grass recycling, and by recycling it back onto the lawn rather than bagging it up and sending it to a landfill, that reduces fertilizer needs by 25 to 35%. And the other great advantage from a Zen standpoint is that you end up cutting your lawn maybe 2 or 3 times less a season, which gives you more time to sit up on your deck. But it also helps make for a healthy lawn. Most meadows or what weren't designed to be putting greens. If we want that, we can go watch the Masters. But when you have the taller grass, it grows deeper roots, and those deeper roots reduce the need for irrigation. They also help suppress some of the weeds and increase the overall turf density, which is something we all want to do to protect the bay. The next one is probably a little controversial, but over time, I think we all have to learn to accept the wisdom of the weeds. And this is a great photograph of what is actually a very beautiful thing, a dandelion. But if you talk to other people, they think it's the devil incarnate. But weeds are basically something that's just out of place or in the wrong place. And many of them this time of year are very beautiful. Some of them, like red clover, actually provide nitrification, or they're nitrogen fixers rather, and that helps add nitrogen to the soil. And so here's some really depressing facts on the next slide, just to kind of get you off the weed and feed system. An average acre of lawn, and most of us, we just have a quarter acre or a third acre, but it contains 200 million seeds in the top few inches of the topsoil. Basically, in the field, that's known as a seed bank, where these seeds reside for many, many years, but under the right conditions of moisture, light, exposure, whatnot, as many as 5% of those seeds from any number of species can germinate, which generates up to 250 weeds per square foot. So that's really the Zen approach, is we've got to learn to love them anyway, since they will always be with us. And the other thing is, when you grow as old as me, our vision must go down a bit. The naked eye generally can't distinguish between a perfect lawn, that is with no other species, and one containing 15% of weeds. Some work done about 12, 15 years ago. And the other thing too, from a Zen approach, those weed and feed mixes that we get at the grocery store, no, the big box store, they're pretty darn expensive, and they often take 3 or 4 applications a year. And it does 2 things. It makes you have to cut your grass more frequently because you're boosting the growth rate, but also that fully 45% of homeowners don't realize that they contain herbicides, and those are some of the herbicides that end up in our urban streams that Alana mentioned in her USGS question. So again, we need to kind of learn to love at least some manageable number of weeds. And in most cases, occasional mowing is more than satisfactory to keep it to the right level. All right, well, that was my Zen approach. But let's say you're not feeling so enlightened today. What are some steps if you do, in fact, feel the need to fertilize your lawn? And so the next slide, I think, is an important one for everybody, whether you're a freedom lawn person or whether you're really into turf management till the sun goes down. We don't want to have situations where we have bare spots and exposed soils, erosion, and as you see on the left-hand side. So having dense grass cover where we have turf is something that we want. So In some cases, some degree of at least spot fertilization or regular fertilization, if it gets us to having that dense cover, fertilization is a good thing. And when Alana did her survey, 50% of you, and roughly, I think it was like 46 to 54 or something, but half of you come from low risk lawns where the possibility of high rates of nutrient export is actually pretty low. One of the things our expert panel looked at is if you're a low risk lawn, most of your nutrients stick on the lawn in most cases. So just, fertilization isn't necessarily a sin. But there are some ways you can fertilize to save money and reduce the impact. And so the expert panel basically said, okay, look at your fertilizer bag label. If it says X pounds per 1,000 feet, apply a third to a half of the application rate, and then monitor how the lawn does over the next couple of months. If it turns out it doesn't meet your expectations, you can do another dose of a smaller variety. The other approach is similar, where you split it into 3 or 4 small doses throughout the growing season. So thinking small, thinking less, and it'll save you money in the end. So that was one of the recommendations of the expert panel, was actually one of the first in the country that basically got away from some of the historic extension requirements for fertilization. The next one is only apply fertilizer from roughly Mother's Day to Halloween. Never apply them before the spring green up or after the grass becomes dormant in the late fall and winter. Research shows that most of the fertilizer loss occurs when your grass is dormant after November, and then it either washes off or leaches out because the grass isn't there to pick up the fertilizer. And one quick note, we all love slow release fertilizers, but if you add a slow release fertilizer late in the fall, it's then available in the winter for runoff. So slow release are good, but in the middle of the growing season and not toward the end. A couple other things. You have choices in the fertilizer you buy. Slow release fertilizer, which has 20 to 50% insoluble nitrogen. By that, it means it doesn't move with water, so it takes a while to break down into something more availability. The other tip is to, particularly in our smaller yards, it's hard with broadcast or rotary spreaders to prevent some of the granules from accumulating on the street or driveway. And that's really a big risk for wash off at that point. So sweeping up any areas where you miss, and if you're close to water, whether it's a stream, a ditch, a swale, you want to not apply fertilizer within 15 feet at a minimum. So yeah, if you're going to fertilizer, if you do all those things, you're really reducing your impact a great deal. The last factor really isn't about fertilization per se, but it's for everybody on the call, whether you fertilize or not. You have a lot of biomass that your lawn produces, and you want to treat it like it's this low release fertilizer. So if you have lawn clippings, you certainly don't want to store them on the street or the curb. And even in the fall, when you put out your leaves for pickup, you have to be really careful that you don't let them wash into the storm drain system. There's some really neat studies in the upper Midwest which show that fall leaf litter produces about 20% of the total phosphorus loading to lakes up there. So, you know, it's not just about the fertilizer bag, it's the lawn clippings, the leaves, the pollen, and things like that. So keeping it off impervious surfaces is always good watershed stewardship. And my apologies for including yet another useless factoid about lawn clippings. And I think let's move from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in, Tom, because there was a question or two that came in that's sort of related to this slide on the leaves in particular. And, you know, one of those, and we had a good suggestion in the chat box, but about if you have some woods or, you know, treed area around your property, and should you be getting the leaves off of your lawn? Like if you bag them up and put them into the woods or something like that, you know, feelings on that versus, you know, using them as a fertilizer by kind of grinding them up and leaving them on the lawn itself.
Yeah, we'll probably talk a little bit more about that, and I'd love to hear what Mary and Philip have to say. But basically, it's really a two-step process that I use. I usually grind whatever leaves that are on my yard in the fall with my mower once, and then the extra leaves I'll create mulch with my mower as well, but I'll create a compost pile and use them to dress up my beds and my conservation landscapes in the winter and spring. But maybe we can get some more discussion about that, because there's a lot of different viewpoints on how to do that.
Sure, we'll save that for the hacker portion. I'll let you get to the crop circle challenge.
Yeah, which is very exciting to me, because as we talked about a couple of weeks ago in the rain gardens, you know, we have these visitors from outer space that come and create these crop circles. But when you kind of look at it, they're not very beautiful, even though they're done by extraterrestrials. So we have at CSN are starting a contest, and the basic idea is find the least favorite part of your lawn, create a circle with a 5-foot radius, remove the turf, loosen the soils, and season with compost or leaf mulch to taste. Plant this circle with plants that you think a butterfly or a songbird would find cool. Wait a couple months and send us a picture, a selfie, if you will, a crop circle selfie to CSN by the 4th of July. That would be a good time. And we have an award, and someone just says they did a square rather than a circle, but that's okay, we'll take that. These are some of the incredible prizes in this contest that David and I came up with. Anybody who enters will get an authentic UFO visitation certificate to indicate your circle was great. Third place, you can get a lifetime supply of Bubba's gardening gloves. We have about 300 in my basement that I really want to get rid of. Second place, $250 worth of regionally appropriate wildlife seed ball or wildflower seed balls. And then the first grand prize is $250 in cold hard cash, as well as a gift certificate for native plants from a local nursery. We would have rolled it all into a local nursery, but right now it's not all of them, particularly some of our NGO ones, aren't open as much. So anyway, it's kind of a fun contest. We're always eager to, you know, for an organization that created the best urban BMP in the Bay Award, or the Bubbas, we're always a little bit on the humorous side. But yeah, that's all I got today, David.
Great, thanks, Tom. We'll hold a couple of the questions for our hacker discussion. So what I'd like to do now is just go ahead and turn it over to Philip Merritt to get into the conservation landscaping portion of our presentation.
All right, thanks for having me. I'm talking to you today from Lenexa, Virginia, which is about halfway between Williamsburg and Richmond. And today I'll be talking a little bit about conservation landscaping and showing you a couple of example projects demonstrating how you might apply the principles of conservation landscaping to your own home as a way to avoid some of these challenges of maintaining a traditional lawn that we've been talking about. Now, conservation landscaping doesn't need to be anything too complicated or technical. It's just sort of the application of common sense gardening techniques that'll maintain and improve the biodiversity of your yard, your neighborhood, and larger environment. You know, and the basic principles: reducing waste and energy input, getting, using less pesticides and things like that. Natural beauty, finding the character of the landscape that's in your area. When everyone's using all the same ornamental plants everywhere, then every place looks the same. So by using native plants, you sort of make your area a little bit more distinctive. Water conservation, of course, with new constructions of homes, the topsoil is stripped away, it's compacted, it's in really bad shape, and conservation landscape can help remediate that and provide a soil that can absorb water and can support life. So next slide. So one book that's been very helpful to me to understanding the benefits of conservation landscaping and some of the basic science behind it is Bringing Nature Home by Doug Talmy. This guy's been doing research on native plants and insects for many years, and he does speaking engagements all over the country. So you can just Google Doug Talmy, you'll find all kinds of good information. He's got a nice website. You can find his talks online. So I'd highly recommend that book. So there are two big lessons that I took from his book about why it's so important to provide wildlife habitat in your yard. The first is kind of basic. Wildlife habitat increases the number of pollinating insects, which are critical to the reproduction of native plants and food crops, which of course are the basis of the food chain for all life. In really simple terms, plants take light from the sun, convert it into food for pollinating insects, and in turn these insects assist in the reproduction of native plants. But why are native plants so important versus non-native plants? Next slide. So this brings us to the second big lesson from Talmy's book, which is that it's primarily native plants which provide food for the thousands and thousands of species of insect herbivores which live in our environment. The problem with a lot of the introduced ornamentals, say like with the crepe myrtle tree, is that our native insects can't tolerate the toxins from these foreign trees. They're just not used to them, so they don't provide any food source. But native plants, insects can easily eat them, no problem, and the native plants have evolved to tolerate these attacks from insects and can usually recover from them pretty quickly. So, leaf damage is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's a sign that nature is working as intended, that insects are eating the plants like they're supposed to, and the plants do fine. Next slide. And then, it's a sign that there are insects in your yard that are providing food for songbirds and other wildlife. And, sometimes people think that, birds live off seeds and berries, but actually insects are a huge part of the diet, and insects are available all year, whereas seeds and berries aren't necessarily around all year. Next slide. And sort of one interesting thing about the insects and native plants is that not any insect can eat every plant. So for example, you have the zebra swallowtail, which only can eat the leaves of a pawpaw tree. So no pawpaw trees, and there are no zebra swallowtails. And so there are a lot of interesting complex relationships like that. I don't know if you can read this, but this is a page from Talmy's book, sort of with a list of trees and other plants indicating how many native species of insects that they can provide food for. So at the top end of that, it would be like an oak tree, which can support 500 species of insects. Okay, next slide. So let's just talk briefly about native plants and the types and their functions. So we've got our trees, our shrubs, perennials and possibly ground covers, although, you know, there's not really a lot of ground covers available, so I kind of usually skip that over. And then the reasons that people will generally tell you that natives are important: aesthetics, yes, as I mentioned earlier, the natives really give that unique character to every region, and every region is different, and so it's good to sort of highlight that instead of making every place look the same. Habitat benefits, as we just described, they provide a lot of, they're the basis of all food for all animal life. Lower maintenance, you'll hear that a lot of times, which is not necessarily true. I think maintenance has more to do with the size of your garden than what's growing in it. So if you want a low maintenance garden, you kind of try a small garden. And you also sometimes hear that they're climate adapted, which is kind of true, but a typical yard is not a native environment. It's been modified, soils have been changed, the drainage is different. So not all natives can survive happily in your yard. You just need to find the ones that are best adapted to sort of a general purpose yard. Next slide. So trees, these are the most dominant types of plants in our area. And I think for most of us who are listening in, you know, the landscape we live in, it wants to be a forest, it wants to grow trees. So if you're not growing trees, you're fighting what the land wants to do. And as we saw from Doug Tallamy's charts, trees provide the most benefit for food for native insects. The greatest variety and number of species. They're the longest lasting, so you can put in a tree, it'll be here 100 years from now, whereas perennials might only be 5 years or something like that. And then the most important thing to remember about trees is they come in lots of different sizes. So some trees are big, some are small, and for the typical residential landscape, you want to focus on those small trees. So really think about the size of the tree that you're planning to put in. Next slide. So here you see, like on the far end, the white oak and the pine tree get huge, and you want to keep those away from your house. So it's smaller trees like, say, a sassafras or a dogwood that are going to work well near your house. You don't have to worry necessarily about them falling on and causing damage because they just don't get that big. And that's one thing to think about. And it's so tempting. I see this all the time, is tree placement is one of the biggest mistakes that people make, because when you buy a tree or any plant, really, it's small. So the temptation is to put it up close to your house or pack them in together. But you really need to think about what are they going to look like 5 or 10 years down the road, and make sure that they go in the right location so that they're not causing lots of problems down the road. Next slide. Next slide. And then shrubs. Shrubs are great because they are relatively low maintenance compared to, say, perennials. If you put the shrub in the right place, it's the right size, you can let it get to the size it wants to be without having to do a lot of trimming, then it's really takes care of itself. It will shade a lot of ground cover, which is good because that limits weed, and so you don't have to do as much maintenance. You don't have to disturb as much soil. Say if you're putting in a planting bed, with perennials, you have to dig up and amend the soil, but a shrub, you're basically just disturbing the area where it's planted. And sort of as with trees, you know, shrubs, you have to think about the size, because most people think of a shrub as something 3 to 4 foot, but most shrubs want to get 8 feet or so. So it's another thing. You don't want to have them in a spot where they're going to grow right up against the house and you're going to be fighting with them for years. Larger shrubs farther away from the house, smaller dwarf varieties can be up close. All right, next slide. And perennials, these are probably the most fun because they're the most colorful and there's lots of variety, but they're a little bit more higher maintenance. So when you're thinking about shrub or perennials, you want to maybe pick out ones that are easily identifiable, ones that aren't going to take over your yard, ones that tend to clump rather than spread. And then the other thing you have to think about for maintenance would be weeding and mulching. So, perennials are a nice accent, but if you want to really sort of save on labor and maintenance, maybe don't have as many perennials. All right, next slide. Next slide. Oh, and
Sorry,
then
Phil.
when you're thinking
There's a
about
bit of a
perennials,
lag on my end for some reason.
okay, sorry. So there are a couple of plants that are really kind of super providers for wildlife habitat, and a lot of perennials will only maybe support 4 or 5 species of insects, but there are a few that can support up to like 100 species. So if you are putting in some perennials for habitat, these are some of the ones that you really want to consider: goldenrod, aster, Joe Pye weed, and sunflower. Definitely get the most bang for the buck on those. Next slide. And then some other ones that I've found that are good in my yard that haven't been too much of a maintenance problem, be Amsonia, Baptisia, penstemon, coneflower, dwarf Yopon holly is a good shrub. Switchgrass is kind of a good basic native grass to work with, and then black-eyed Susan. And then there's a couple approaches that you can take to your yard. And a lot of times you hear about establishing meadows, but you need to consider that meadows are actually they're better for large properties because they tend to get big. Native grasses get tall, as you can see from this group of native plant enthusiasts on a nature walk. This native grass is way over their heads. So although meadows are good, and for the typical residential yard, I would suggest the next strategy in the next slide, which would be the forest edge approach. Thinking about mimicking the natural growth patterns of a forest where you have tall trees and providing shade on an interior space, and then on the edges you have more light for shrubs, and then as you get more light, then you can get some of these grasses and things like that. So it's kind of a transition, and I think that works best for a typical yard. So this is a case study of a house that I used to live in Williamsburg, Virginia, sort of showing you some of these techniques. Next slide. So, I mean, basically, when you're thinking about your yard, you just want to start out with a sketch, sort of identifying major elements like where's the house, where are the trees, and in this sketch you can see I've minimized my lawn to my backyard, which is that sort of bright green area. And the rest of the yard, I was looking for different types of plantings so I wouldn't have as much lawn to maintain. Next slide. So in the front yard, instead of lawn, I put in a bunch of ferns, and I don't have a great picture of it. You can kind of see along this walkway in the middle, there's to the edge of that, there's some ferns, and that continued all the way to the street. So, and I had a mix of all kinds of native ferns: maidenhair, lady fern, ostrich fern, Christmas ferns. And basically, you know, you just, instead of lawn, you just let the leaves lie there and you fill it in with ferns. Of course, ferns need a lot of shade, which I had because I had some mature trees. So this, it wouldn't necessarily work in a sunny situation, but it did work out here. Next slide. And in between the ferns, I put in a lot of small native perennials to add a little bit of interest throughout the year. Mostly spring, of course, is when these are blooming. Green gold, jack-in-the-pulpit, trillium, lady slipper orchid, bloodroot, shooting star, foam flower, bluebells. You know, these are all small things that you don't have to trim, and they just sort of pop up where they want to, kind of move around in the yard, and really, really nice little accents. Next slide. Of course, in something like this, you know, this is the off-season view. This is just coming out of winter. So you do see some things coming back, but for, from fall throughout the winter, you're looking at a lot of leaf mulch, which doesn't necessarily bother me. And I had a big hedge that screened it from the neighbors, so they didn't have to see it. But, not everything looks beautiful year round. So you have to kind of accept that. Next slide. And then another approach to minimizing lawn would be to do shrubs. And as I mentioned before, shrubs just take up a lot of space. So that's less yard you have to maintain, less weeding you have to do. So shrubs create the shade, which keeps down those weeds. When you're doing shrubs, it's nice to have walkways through them. So you're not just creating a big spot in your yard where you can't ever go. It's just to have some paths winding in amongst the shrubs. Oak leaf hydrangea was great for this. My shady yard. Rhododendron was kind of iffy. Rhododendrons are happy, or when they find the right spot, they're super happy. When they're not in the right spot, they're kind of tricky. Leucothaway had a variegated form, which was really nice, and just did a mass planting of it, 12 feet by 12 feet, and then just takes care of itself. And then I've got a list of and then the other strategy for reducing lawn is to put in water garden. And here you can see my house before I put in my water garden afterwards. And that's lizard's tail that's coming up in there. Next slide. So, and I kind of have a mix of things, and this was a pretty shady water garden. So water gardens in the sun tend to get a lot of algae, so I found it to be much better for a shady area, which sort of kept it a little bit easier to maintain. Had royal ferns in pots, which I would take in and take out in the winter, but kept in the lizard's tail and the spider lily. Next slide. And there are plenty of other great plants that'll do well in wet or moist areas. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a pond. It could be a low wet spot like a rain garden. Of course, you get more variety if the sunnier the location. You can get things like cardinal flower or swamp milkweed, turtlehead, things like that. All right, next slide. And then one other thing that I've sort of learned about recently, which has been kind of fun to experiment with, is hugelkultur, which is just a fun word to say. And this is a technique that comes from Germany, where it's kind of a no-till technique where you just pile up logs and branches and layer it with leaves. And then you can build a little above ground garden space. The branches and logs absorb water, so it's sort of, you don't have to water it as much, and then the hill structure gives it nice drainage and access to light on different sides. So it's a great way to use up just stuff that's lying around your yard. Next slide. And here you got the window. You can kind of see into it, the way it's stacked with the logs in the middle, and then the leaf compost and topsoil on the outside. Next slide. You can also get creative, so it doesn't have to be, it's just a simple triangle. Here I've got there's a snake-like mound, which could be kind of fun. Next slide. And here's a sort of a variation on that I've tried in my yard, where it's not necessarily completely above ground. Here I've dug down, so to sort of collect some of that water to store in the logs and the branches that are down there. So first you just got to dig, then you add your sticks and logs. Pretty simple stuff. Next slide. Add in a layer of leaves, and then you can improve that with some compost and plant it, and then that's it. And then, you've got that sort of built-in water basin in the bottom that helps with the watering. And I see a question about termites. I would imagine that probably is a problem, so you wouldn't want to necessarily do it right next to your house. But my area, I've got lots of woods with fallen trees everywhere, so it doesn't really matter. There's going to be termites no matter what I do. So that's my talk.
All right. Thanks very much, Philip. Really appreciate that. I think it's a really good introduction for folks. I know one of the things that us largely stormwater folks have trouble with is the actual green stuff. You know, it's the plant selection, it's knowing what to pick out and what to place for the different environments. So I appreciate that overview. I think it's a really good place to start. You know, and I'll also kind of use this for a second to plug some of the other webcasts that we've done in this series, because we have spent quite a bit of time putting together some resource lists, and we do have a few links at the end of the webcast today as well. But if you go to the slideshows from, for instance, our Victory Rain Garden webcast, as well as our tree planting webcast, there's a lot of information on native plant guides, books if you want to read up, you know, in a longer form, as well as some information on nurseries where you can source and find plant material and things like that, both from sort of a wholesale and a retail perspective right now. So thank you again. I think with that, we're getting into sort of our Q&A for our hackers. And what I want to do first here is talk a little bit about good community resources and advice for our technical assistants. You know, first I want to kind of turn it to Mary, if you are ready to kind of hop on the line here for a second. And you had some resources for us in terms of where you can find some good volunteer folks who can help get involved if you need help with finding materials or knowing what to plant, information like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David, and really enjoyed the presentation so far. I'm aching to get out there and do some of the gardening, and as I'm sure a lot of you are, it's a good time to do that. So here, one of the resources that I use and is a really good community resource are habitat stewards. Volunteers shown here in this slide is a woman named Linda Farrick, who is engaged through our the Lancaster Conservancy, and she's available to go out and do consults with people. It's all volunteer. Here she is receiving an award for the outstanding work that she's done. But more and more across the watershed, we're seeing programs pop up to train people to go out and do this type of work. So two of the examples are the Habitat Stewards and Master Watershed Stewards. So look into that, and I think that's a great resource for people.
Yeah, and you know, a great example of that is, you know, the Anne Arundel County Watershed Stewards Academy, who we've had. Suzanne was on our tree planting webcast a couple of weeks ago. If you're there, you can check them out. And I'll just back up one slide and spend a little bit more time mentioning, you know, our extension agencies, our state extension agencies. Pretty much no matter where you are across the watershed, there are resources available. If you reach out, usually just a quick internet search will help connect you with the appropriate extension agency. And you know, right now, you know, there are obviously fewer site visits, but I know that there are some groups that are helping out by doing it remotely. You know, you can walk around your yard with your phone, you know, if you have a question about something, and you can sometimes get help that way. It can be a really nice thing to have. Any of our other speakers want to weigh in on any good community resources or technical assistance programs that you particularly like or want to point out to folks?
Well, I would just add, you know, there are a lot of native plant societies in everyone's community, so and they have good websites, so that's always a good place to check.
Yeah, and another great point, the a little bit of self-promotion in our chat box. The local soil and water conservation districts fall right into this wheelhouse as well. You know, they're really great districts around the watershed, and another one that you can do if you can just do a little bit of internet searching, find out what your district area is, who might be available to help you out, and they can be a really good resource as well. All right, so another question for our hackers, and I'll, you know, again, open this up to all of you. But, you know, what if I just want less turf? You know, Philip talked about options for a lot of different conservation landscaping approaches that range from maybe meadows for larger yards to, you know, more of a, you know, transitional type of landscape and things like that. You know, what are some options, you know, that you could consider that, you know, maybe for different skill levels or different amounts of maintenance and things like that, that you might want to consider?
So I'll jump in here first. This is my backyard. I live in the middle of a borough, which the comment earlier today in another meeting about the risks associated with density as we face these unique times we're in. But here, what I'm doing with my yard is just slowly converting it. Converting the entire yard at one time is just too much to take on. So what I've done here is just started with one corner, trying to screen out my neighbors' air conditioning units and keep our dogs separated. Here, what I've done is I just put newspaper down. And right now, a lot of communities have discontinued recycling programs for newspaper. So people are looking for things to do that. Just wet it and put it on the ground. And then I used conventional mulch here because I didn't have sufficient access to other leaf mulch at the time. And then began just inserting some plants throughout there. I've got things like switchgrass and hamamelis, the witch hazel in the background. I've got a black gum tree that I'm hoping will just provide some good shade. It's very hot in the middle of the borough. We've lost a lot of big trees. So it's getting hotter and hotter. So that helps with that. The sidewalk down the edge here, I'm going to break up with a sledgehammer and plant some plant material in there. And then I'm converting the middle of my yard into a path to get out in the back. And again, that helps with things like keeping dogs separated at the fence and also just providing some interest. So this is the beginning. This was last year, was able to convert this section in a couple of days. But I think the approach of just taking it a little bit at a time is what I would recommend, and use the resources that you've got to begin making that conversion. And eliminating the turf has been great. I spend less time mowing, so really enjoying that, gardening rather than mowing.
Just a quick follow-up question, Mary. A good question from Karen. With the newspaper that you put down, did you dig up your turf beforehand, or did you use that to help, you know, make it easier to get rid of the turf, keep it from growing up through your mulch?
I did a little bit of excavation of the turf first. Because of the soils here, I didn't have a lot of real good solid turf cover, but I did have to dig up some of the turf so that it wouldn't continue to break through. And then you've always got this edge that you have to maintain or let eventually, you know, come out and continue to erode away the grass. Honestly, with two big dogs and it doesn't, the grass is not too hard to dig up. Roots are really shallow. I'm looking for a good path material to use though, because the path is a little bit of a challenge, and I don't want to use hardscape too much. So still playing around with that. And I do mulch. I wanted to just mention, actually, never mind. That's going to come up later.
Yeah, I'll also actually just take a moment to mention for folks, since we are at 12 o'clock, that we're going to go ahead and keep going for a couple more minutes. We have a couple other questions we want to get to. If you can hang around, great, please do. But if you have to log off, totally understand. Like I said, we'll have the recording and the slides all posted for you by the end of the day on Monday, so you can catch the last couple of minutes if you'd like to. I'll go ahead and go to our next question, which is, what do I look for when I'm looking for a natural lawn care service company or a landscaping contractor? There's a lot of companies that are out there, and you know, I don't want to get into recommending a specific company or anything like that, but there are some really good services available. And is there anything in particular that sort of helps make for a good landscaping or lawn service company?
Well, I used to work for a company here in Williamsburg that did lawn maintenance, and I'm promoted on our website, the member of the Chesapeake Bay Club, and so you can just check some credentials to see if that's something that they include. One thing I think to keep in mind when you're looking for a natural lawn service company is don't get too upset when your lawn doesn't look as green and lush as everyone else's, because even though we did our best to follow some of these regulations, we didn't fertilize as much as other companies, and it did kind of show up in our yard. So you just have to kind of be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I'll also put in a plug here too. Somebody mentioned it in the chat box. The Chesapeake Bay Landscaping Professionals program is a good way to kind of take a look. They have on their website, and this is a resource that's been linked in our other webcasts. We've had Beth Ginter from CBLP join us as one of our hackers before, and they do training programs for landscape designers, landscape architects, and help get them certified. And so they have a directory on their website that you can use to search for folks that have gone through their training and received that certification. And it's a pretty good tool if you are looking for ways to get started and you're looking for somebody that does that landscaping contracting that has a good background in the Bay Protection Foundation. All right. As far as the best ways to recycle leaves into my backyard. So we got into this a little bit earlier, but I will sort of open this question back up again for folks. Tom talked a little bit about it. Tom, I don't know if you wanted to jump back in with anything else, or Mary, if you had anything you'd like to add to this part of the discussion.
Well, on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side rather, is my compost pile, which I'm very proud of. But compost piles do require a fair amount of work to get them going and to turn them over so that you have the material to be able to drop back onto the yard. So over time, I've gotten away from the big compost pile. And as you can see on the left-hand side, I try to grind up at least the surface cover of leaves, sorry for the truck, in the latter part of the fall, and then rake the rest of them into my conservation beds, let them break down naturally. And I've had pretty good luck with that, but maybe there's some other tricks that other people have. I guess the big thing is I don't really feel comfortable putting them in a bag to go to a landfill. I'd rather use that biomass to on my own lawn, with the proviso that if you use a lot of leaves for compost, you will get kind of like the forest floor, which often means a little bit more acidity to your soils than you would have. So taking a soil test, we didn't talk about that yet, but a soil test can tell you whether maybe rather than fertilizing, you might want to put a little bit of lime down once in a while or other soil amendments. So that's my quick tip.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I know there was some questions that came up earlier about a composting mower, or I think the other term for it is a mulching mower. And I bought a mower last year that has, it is a mulching mower, but it also has a bag. So what I do is I rake my leaves into a pile or a big long line in the yard, and then I mow over it and I bag that, and then I go and dump that on my garden bed. So it mulches those leaves up real nicely, and then I'm able to add that as a mulch onto my other garden bed. So that works a little bit better for me in my environment. I actually steal leaves from my neighbors too, and do the same thing with theirs. So I think that's it, but I love having the leaves in my beds.
There's a sort of a Mythbusters type question in here. I don't know if anybody has an answer for this, but I'll put it out because I think it's interesting. Someone said, I was once told that it's beneficial to mow in different directions or patterns each time. You know, you go northwest once, east-west, or north-south once, east-west one's diagonal and the other to try to mix things up. Has anybody else heard of that or know of any value to that particular approach?
Well, I think if that might help a little bit with compaction. If you're not going over the same spot in the same direction, you know, it sort of spreads out that the compaction throughout the yard. So you have less maybe spread out over the yard rather than, you know, developing furrows. But I don't know that it makes that much of a difference.
How about recommendations for creating compost bins for somebody who's looking to get started in doing some more composting, either with leaves or perhaps other household food waste and things like that they might be interested in composting? Are there any either tips or tricks that you have, or maybe just resources that you could point folks to who might be interested in getting started with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of commercially available compost bins. I have a circular one where you can just give it a spin every time you fill it up with food scraps. Usually like 2 parts leaves to 1 part food scraps, and that's generally work with me. But I got away from, in the old days, of having a big compost pile and throwing my food scraps on it, because that tended to attract things like raccoons and opossum. And I don't mind that, you know, attracting wildlife, but when the rats came, that was much fun. So if you do food composting, it's often pretty good to have it in an enclosed container.
All right, another question for our hackers. How do I get a representative soil test for my yard? And then what do I do with the results if I'm looking to figure out maybe what makes sense? Tom mentioned, you know, if you have a lot of leaves in your ground, maybe you have a little bit more acidity in your soils. Maybe you already have all the nitrogen or phosphorus that you need. You don't need to be fertilizing your grass. How do you go about doing that?
So I know, oh, this
Go
is
ahead.
Mary. I went down to my local extension office and they gave me a kit that I can use to come home and just grab a soil test and stick it in the mail. It comes with an envelope and send it off. I think it's still sitting here and I got it about 6 years ago, so I can't tell you what to do with the results.
This is Alana. I remember there were some instructions on mine about taking different samples throughout your yard and mixing them all in a bucket and then just putting a portion of that into the bag that you send away. And just a caution, when you get the results back, it may tell you that you do need nitrogen or phosphorus, but maybe just do what Tom said and try a little bit first and don't automatically apply everything that they recommend.
Let's see, what else do we have here? All right, so, you know, Philip spent a lot of time on this, but maybe we'll just touch on it once more to see if, you know, Philip, feel free to jump in again, or if Alana or Mary or Tom have any other favorites that you guys like. But good native plant choices to attract pollinators and songbirds in particular. I know those are things that a lot of people are looking for, you know, when they're looking for habitat. So what are some particular favorites of yours?
I just put this slide in, David, because the catbird on the right-hand side is a migratory bird, and it just showed up in our yard a couple days ago. And I think Alana was saying that she has some catbirds in West Virginia that are pretty noisy. So it's always fun just to think about the landscaping in terms of some of the songbirds that you can attract. And so anyway, I'm just a catbird lover.
Yeah, and since you tagged me, I'll go ahead and say one more thing. We had a white azalea blooming this year that was visited by hummingbirds. So I was amazed that the old wisdom that they like red flowers may be true, but they also visit white flowers. And I was happy to see them sampling my white azalea.
Yeah, and I just reemphasize that, it's not necessarily the seeds or the berries that are going to attract these birds, but it's the insects that feed on the native plants. So, again, go back to, Google Doug Talmy, find his chart on, the most productive plants, the goldenrods, the mountain mint, that sort of thing that can attract dozens and dozens of species, and use those as much as you can.
We also had a request, I'll put this out here for folks in the chat box. Of course, any panelists can weigh in as well, but if there's any, going back to our compost question, if anybody knows of a rodent-proof compost bin, it is much appreciated, as some folks have had some struggles with that. And I'll also point out that we had one of our soil and water conservation district partners put a little bit more information on the soil test kits in there, that you can get those from the cooperative extension. They should have supplies and instructions for how to collect a sample and where to mail it, so you can get that information directly from them. And that along with those kits, besides just the fertilizing recommendations, one of the most useful results from their experience is the pH or acidity, alkalinity results for your soil. Since it can be a little bit difficult to fix, and it can help you pick out your native plant species a little bit more appropriately. Another question that came in that I thought was interesting, it's sort of a merging of two topics, one of which is a little outside the scope of today, but I think part of it is relevant, which is, she said that they are starting to see during the winter time, as an alternative to putting down salt for de-icing, people are starting to try to use fertilizers as an option for, knocking the ice down on their properties. And obviously both are going to cause impacts. What are some things you should be on the lookout for, if people are considering some of those different options? And perhaps we can save it for another webcast as well, because I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, since it's a little bit outside of our native plant selection webcast. But I will say on the road salt issue, we do have some webcasts in our archives that kind of go into quite a bit of detail on some of the impacts and issues related to road salt. And obviously swapping in fertilizers are going to cause just a different suite of issues. As Tom mentioned, the wash off, if you're applying them to your driveways and pavement, is going to cause quite a few issues to your local streams and waterways. And then we have this one on some good ways to reinvigorate an overly mature conservation landscape. And so this gets into the question of maintenance. And Philip, you talked a little bit about how to provide some, or how to think ahead, I guess, about what the maintenance burden is going to be when you're making your garden design and plant selection. But any tips and tricks for folks who maybe took a little bit too zen of approach for a while and they're trying to rein it in?
I mean, other than just putting in the labor to clear it out, I don't really have any other tips. On my property, I have about 3 acres. About half of it is wooded, and I've gone through, just to increase diversity, I've thinned out a lot of sapling trees and a lot of we have the evergreen hollies, which create a lot of light. So, I mean, the only thing I've done is, trying to get a little bit more light down to the forest floor to get a little bit more diversity in the understory. But I mean, yeah, it can be a real challenge if you've got something like some invasive plant like vinca that's coming in. And I mean, I do use Roundup occasionally. I hate to do that, but sometimes that's you need some help, because otherwise it's just a lot of labor. So, advanced planning and thinking through is probably the best strategy.
I think the thing I would offer is just don't be afraid to move things around and dig things up and pass them on to somebody else if you can. If they're not right for your yard. So play around with it, move things around, and prune at the appropriate times. I've had to prune back one of my beautiful sweet shrub that just kept growing and growing and growing. It's so beautiful, but it was taking over my entire yard. So I gave it a pretty hard prune, and now it's much better. But there's a lot of good videos on YouTube on good pruning practices. But so make sure you do those before you hack away at things.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our structured Q&A. And I think we got to most of the questions in the chat box as well. So what I'll do, here's the link to the survey. I really would appreciate if folks could take a second to fill this out. It's very short. I think it's maybe 6 questions. It should take you 2 to 3 minutes maybe to fill it out. And that's if you want to give us detailed answers, which we do appreciate. It's a good way for our funders to know if we're doing a good job. It's a good way for us to know if there's stuff that you would like us to do more of, do less of, do better. So if you can do that, it's much appreciated. I put a link directly in the chat box so that you can go straight to it. Because I don't think that it works if you just click on your screen where I have the link that I'm sharing. So I do appreciate that. I want to say thank you, since we're kind of well past our time here, to all of our speakers today, all of our hackers, and thank you to everyone joining us, both for just being supportive of the webcast series, but also for chiming in with all of your great ideas, questions, and advice in the chat box. It's a big help. So again, please feel free. I will put the recording and the slides up on our website by Monday. If you can share it with other colleagues that you think might be helpful, that's always appreciated as well. We have one more webcast on the docket this spring that's a bit of a change of pace from this type of series. It's also going to be pretty interactive, but we're really focusing on some technical nitty-gritty stuff for the next one. It is in conjunction with the modelers of the Chesapeake Bay Program Office, talking about how to input stream restoration projects into their watershed modeling tools. So if that's something that floats your boat, please join us for that. If not, just be on the lookout for our newsletter, and we will let you know as soon as we have the next batch of webcasts up and ready to go for registration. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you liked it and found things helpful. And we will talk to you again soon.